What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for another episode of Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Gonna try a new version of the bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Melito. Welcome to Gunfighter Life. What are we going to talk about today? Well, you probably read the title. We're going to talk about a first deer rifle, a young man's primarily, but there's people getting into deer hunting all the time by God's grace. So I guess any man's, but I'm mostly thinking about young men. But a first deer rifle. I've said this before, but I think here in America, we're primarily a nation of deer hunters. We hunt all kinds of things. But if you say hunting to somebody, whether they hunt or not, they'll probably think about deer hunting. There's plenty of duck hunting and elk hunting and bear hunting and fox and coon and coyote. But primarily when you think about hunting here in America, we think about deer. Primarily whitetail, because the vast majority of the U.S. population lives east of the Mississippi. But these would work fine for mule deer too, so we're going to talk about that today. A first deer rifle. My number one pick for this is going to be a working man's rifle. So I worked hard when I was a young man to buy my first deer rifle, and I was given my first shotgun by an uncle. It was kind of beat up and broken, and I think my other uncle restored it. And that was given to me at a very young age, but I bought my first deer rifle as a very young man. And a lot of men out there might be trying to work hard and provide for themselves, their family, and get a deer rifle. And this is the utilitarian pick. Like, it will put meat on the table. It is a fine choice. And that is the Savage Axis. The Savage Axis is an awesome rifle. Every one I've ever had has been amazingly accurate. Like, if I had paid 2 or 3 times as much for that rifle and it had shot that good, I'd have been totally happy with it. They are accurate as all get out. At least, again, every one that I've ever owned. You can get them that come with a 3-9 scope. It's not the best scope, but it'll put meat on the table. It's a good all-around setup. I think I saw one at Walmart recently for $3.99. I think they used to be quite a bit cheaper, but it doesn't really do us any good to worry about what things used to cost. I think I just saw one at Walmart recently for $3.99. But getting a good Savage Axis, I would go stainless. It might cost you a little bit more, but it'll probably pay for itself if you live anywhere where it might rust or you travel. But they do make it in stainless. That's a win as far as I'm concerned. And my top pick for this is going to be .243. It's an amazing caliber. I have killed a lot of deer and elk with a .243. Now, I don't advise it for an elk hunting caliber unless you really know what you're doing and you're going to wait for the proper shot at the proper distance. But it's for a deer rifle, it is fantastic. And people will kind of downplay it because it's a smaller caliber. It is devastating on deer, especially with the right load. And that right load for me historically has been an 85 grain Sierra Game King that I hand loaded, or if it's factory ammo, I believe it's the 100 grain Federal High Shock. It's a good load, proven. But really whatever your rifle likes that is made for deer size game. It's kind of a crossover caliber, so they make some varmint rounds for it. Don't use those on deer, but 243 is awesome on deer. So my number one pick for a working man, a blue collar, is going to be a Savage Axis in 243 with that 3-9 scope that comes on it. My next pick is going to be if you want to step up to that heirloom quality rifle, like the rifle that you're going to hand down to your son or grandson, and you hope they hand down to their grandson. Just a beautiful piece of workmanship as far as steel and wood. And I really can't think of anything to recommend other than this, and that is the Winchester Model 70. Now, the old pre-64s are great, and they had a really good, in my opinion, the best action. They had a controlled round feed, really good safety, that old original Mauser and Springfield 1903 kind of bolt system. To me, that's my favorite. I really like it. Some people like push feed, that's fine, but I like that one. And with everything going on with Remington, I can't really recommend them as the alternate push feed option. But if you're talking about a new rifle, the Winchester Model 70s, they went for a long time from that action, and they went to a cheaper push feed action. And then in recent years, they went back to the original action, and I think that's awesome. You can get some really nice models. Take your pick of whatever color wood and stuff you want and really fine bluing, but they are just what you think of when you think of like a classic American hunting rifle. And for that, that's an amazing rifle. So that Winchester Model 70, the brand new ones, they're good rifles. They're beautiful rifles. If you do a lot of, let's say, off-grid, in the wilderness or mountain kind of hunting, you may consider the featherweight. They're great, lighter, handier, still beautiful. But just their blued steel, not just, but their blued steel and walnut. They even make some really pretty maple models, beautiful guns. And I would top that, since you're going a good gun, I would top it with a Leupold. I like Leupold. They're an American-made glass company, so you got a Winchester, and top it with some good American glass. The Leupold, their VX Freedom lines are great, and you just go up from there. But even their Freedom line, I think, is a fine scope. The classic quintessential topping for this is going to be a 3-9. That's been the go-to for a long time. I prefer lower powers, but I know that I'm the oddball there. You might look at a 2-7. I usually run LPVOs on most of my hunting guns. Most people don't do that. I like to spot and stalk and still hunt. But if you want that classic all around, you might go 2-7 or you might go 3-9 and that Leupold. And if you're going to do this, this is going to be a rifle maybe that they're going to have for a lifetime in their kid's lifetime, depending how big they are when they get it or how big you are when you get it. I still like the 243 if it's just for deer, but if this is a rifle they're going to use for everything, you get a couple other options there. 308 is a great pick. 30-06, I would probably go 30-06 in this over 308 because we're talking about classic American heirloom quality piece, right? When you think classic American hunting cartridge, you generally think 30-06. This combo in a 30-06 would be fantastic. One of the new classics, I don't know that I would get it in this, but would be 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a good choice for deer and a little bit larger animals, but I think for this I would go 30-06 for that heirloom quality, hand down to a son or a grandson, multi-generational kind of rifle. If you want to go truly classic and historical, so this is my historical pick. If you want to hunt with that American heritage, you may look at the Winchester 94. It has been putting deer on the table for a long, long time, since the 1800s. And it's still a good, handy deer rifle if you hunt in the woods, if you're a woods hunter. And it's still popular out west, but if you do most of your hunting inside of 200 yards, and most people do, it's a great rifle. It's going to kind of ruin the classicness of it to scope it. You can if you want, but just a good 94 with iron sights is a good way to learn hunting. It's a good way to learn marksmanship. Good iron sights. And I'm not sponsored by Winchester. I get nothing from them. I get no kickbacks or anything from anybody. I'm supported by Patreon, so if you like an honest opinion, hope you'll consider becoming a patron. But the Winchester 94, it's a classic, iconic American hunting rifle. Not only is it good for that, it's also good to just take out and shoot. It's fun. And the classic caliber this comes in is .30-30, and that's what I would get it in. It's classic. It's a great round. It's a great round to do all kinds of shooting and reloading and stuff with if you want to get into doing that. But the Winchester .30-30 is a great deer round, and it's taken many a elk as well, and people will say it's underpowered, but deer aren't taxonomically any different than they were 100 years ago. That's put a lot of animals in the freezer. Don't give in to all the marketing hype and think you need the next, latest, greatest round that came out this year, because the deer have built up an immunity to the round that you hunted them with last year. You know, the .30-30 works just fine. It's a great rifle. That Winchester 94. The other option for this would be the Marlin. And I think the Marlins, honestly, are a better hunting rifle if I'm just going for hunting, like to put meat on the table. But if you're going for historicity, if you're going for that historic, beautiful, kind of iconic American old school hunting rifle, I'd go with the Winchester 94. They're a little bit lighter and handier as well. The Marlins have the advantage of a flat top solid receiver, so you can mount optics on them easier. But again, that kind of ruins the classicness of this. For this, I would go 94 and I would go .30-30. Classic, beautiful, old school American. You want to hunt with some LL Bean boots and a red flannel shirt, you know, and a Jones hat. It's great. Now, let's talk about what I would consider kind of the higher end modern version. Not necessarily heirloom, but like you want a really, really good rifle, perhaps the best. And for that, I can only recommend what I use and what I use as a professional hunter and guide, and that is a Kimber. Specifically, I like the Kimber Adirondack. It's a little light for most people, but I do like to do a lot of long range, call them long hunts, and pretty rough and nasty terrain. The Kimber Adirondack's a good rifle, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would just recommend the Kimber Hunter. It uses that same pre-64 Winchester action, but in my opinion even better, because with modern metallurgy they can make it smaller and lighter and handier, but with the stronger steels it can still handle the modern cartridges. So that being said, that Kimber Hunter is a lightweight rifle in and of itself, and they make the newer looking ones. If you're new to deer hunting, you may not know, but the polymer stocks generally are less affected by weather and humidity depending on how hard you're going to hunt. They do make the classic looking ones, and those are beautiful too. You might want to look at those if that's what you want. But the Kimber Hunter, just the Hunter model, is a great all-around hunting rifle. If you're going all-around hunting, you want deer, but you may do other things. You may look at the 308. My go-to guiding rifle, hunting rifle, is going to be in 6.5 Creedmoor. And that's a great cartridge. It's kind of a new classic. If you want a modern hunting rifle, a really good one, you might look at the 6.5 Creedmoor. It is a really good cartridge. I'm not big on new cartridges. It took me a long time to warm up. I still consider it a new cartridge, but it's a good cartridge. It's not a Magnum. It's not going to beat you up. It's, as much as I hate to admit it, maybe a little bit better than the 243 for all around hunting. I would take shots with my 6.5 Creedmoor that I would not take with a 243 on elk. I think for deer size game, 243 is just fine. And especially if you're talking about out west. And let's transition to talking about western hunting, because the majority of people do live east of the Mississippi, but many aspire to go out west. You know, go west, young man. Did a whole episode on that, the last safari for the common man. You might want to listen to that if you have aspirations to go out west and do it on the cheap. But there are people that live out west, right? I like to be out west. I'm east of the Mississippi now for the first time in a long time, but I generally like to be out west. So let's talk about western picks. That same lineage of gun, that Kimber, they make one called the Mountain Ascent. If I'm talking about western hunting, that generally denotes longer shots. Your classic, going that classic route, or even a modern route, the 270 is great. So you could get that classic looking Kimber or that classic Winchester in a 270. It's a great western hunting cartridge, right? That's kind of what it's known for. It's fantastic. It's big enough for elk. It's great on pretty much any deer-sized game. Inside 300 yards, I'd say go 30-06. The difference is academic. But outside that, you do get a little bit of merit in the 270. It's a little bit flatter shooting cartridge. You're talking about the Mountain Ascent. You're talking about southwestern hunting, like arroyos and high desert and things like that. You're talking about mule deer. A classic cartridge I think is great for that is the 25-06. It's the 30-06 neck down to 25 caliber. It's not really called a Magnum, but you might want to consider it like a light Magnum. It really has a lot of performance. It's a great cartridge if you're talking about that open plains game, mule deer, pronghorn kind of hunting. It is great for that. It's perhaps the best pronghorn hunting cartridge. And the best all-around pick if you're talking about Western hunting, and I don't even own one, but if I had to pick like a best well-rounded big game North American Western hunting cartridge, I would pick the 280 Ackley Improved. And again, I'm talking about new hunters, and especially for new hunters, stay away from magnums. Like a 300 Win Mag, I don't think you're going to practice with it. I don't think you're going to shoot it a lot because they're not a lot of fun to shoot. The 280 Ackley Improved is very efficient. It's only a hair under the 7mm Rem Mag, but it does it with far less powder because it's more efficient. And the powder, the ejecta mass, if you don't know, that works into the physics equation there, and that will equal a lot more recoil for a little bit more velocity. So you are getting a lot more recoil for a little bit more performance, and a lot of times, most of the time, you don't need it. So the 280 Ackley Improved is a great, amazing cartridge. So for an all-around Western hunting rifle, you might look at that Kimber Mountain Ascent and 280 Ackley Improved. And you're going to get no sponsors, no kickbacks. I spend my own money on the guns that I have. Hopefully you'll appreciate that here. There's a lot of other really good rifles. Browning makes a fine rifle. I'm also not talking about the kind of hunting that's in vogue now, because I think it will go out of vogue sooner or later. Like where people have 20, 25-pound rifles and ride around on their side-by-sides and throw it on a giant tripod and shoot animals, over 500 yards away. The animal may not even know that they're there. Like, can't see them, can't smell them. That's not how I hunt. If you want to hunt that way, that's fine. I would still encourage you to learn to hunt the traditional way first. But if you want to do that, there are rifles for that. That's not what this podcast is about. If you were going to get started on that, and again, I don't recommend it, but I would probably recommend the Ruger Precision with something like a 4-18 or something like that. Those are my top picks for a first deer rifle. Hopefully you enjoyed this show. Hopefully you enjoy an honest opinion. Not whatever some gun company sends me for free that I tell you is great because I didn't have to spend money on it. If you like that honest opinion and you want to continue to get it, I hope you'll consider supporting on Patreon. The tactical tip of the day. If you've ever done a lot of hiking with a rifle, especially one with the traditional sling swivels and the traditional metal detachments that go on the traditional hunting slings and the sling swivels, you'll know that they can get a little bit squeaky. So 2 things you can do. One thing that I do, I just get rid of those metal things altogether, and I will tie a piece of micro cord or something like it, real small, probably smaller. Sometimes you can get 550 cord in there if you poke it through, but just make an attachment with 550 cord because it's not going to make noise. It's also not going to rust, a 550 cord anyway. That's generally what gives that squeak. When it gets a light rust in there, if you're on a long hunt, just walking, that can make a real squeaky noise. So just make that out of 550 cord or micro cord and tie it to the sling to eliminate that. Or if you want to keep the metal sling, you can get a rubber band and put it around there so that it's real stiff and it really doesn't wiggle back and forth and make that squeaky sound. That is your tactical tip of the day. The tactical verse of the day is from Matthew chapter 10. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. Man, if you're having a rough time out there, remember endurance. It's a good, manly quality. And it's also very useful for the gunfighter, for the hunter. Endurance. Endure. A man of endurance and patience is far more efficient, in my experience in hunting, than the difference between a 6.5 Creedmoor and a 308. Endure. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.